Well, good evening from a dark and not too dismal Northumberland. And this stuff has been on my mind for, I guess, a week or two now. And because of that, I really wanted to put something onto a YouTube video. Call it cathartic, if you like, in the realization that perhaps no one will be very interested. If you do listen to it, you'll probably, I imagine a lot of my friends would disagree with a lot of what I'm going to say, and that's okay. I need to get this off my chest because there's things that are bothering me about the current attitude of some parts, I stress, some parts of the UK church at the minute, and I'm feeling uncomfortable, and so I want to get this off my chest really, for no other reason, and I'll be posting this and giving a link on Facebook, and just wanted to share some thoughts. So today is the Tuesday, the 10th of November, I believe. Yeah, my computer tells me it's the 10th of November. Microsoft can't be wrong. And three things have happened of late that are, I think, of significance. Perhaps four things, actually. One of the things that has happened is that one or two sections of the church have been almost demanding of the government that religious institutions are allowed to meet in person once again and are regarded as an exemption to the coronavirus. I think for two reasons. One is because of the benefits that religious services offer to people, and the other is perhaps because we are an important part of the fabric of the country, and therefore we should be able to meet for worship because of those sorts of reasons. And these calls are coming from two main directions. One is if you like, the established sort of church. Some of the hierarchy of the Church of England are making these calls because they want to hold services and don't see why they shouldn't. And admittedly, in many Anglican churches, just as in many other Baptist and non-conformist churches, social distancing, sadly, is hardly a problem these days. But the other end of the spectrum, if you like, the charismatic evangelical part of the church, is also demanding that it should be allowed to meet. So that's one recent development. A second recent development is that there have, from similar sources, been calls for a national day of prayer. And I'm told that the General Secretary of the Evangelical Alliance has written to the Prime Minister and to the Queen to request that a formal national day of prayer is called for God to intervene in the coronavirus crisis. And apparently they're a bit miffed because they've had a polite but non-committal response, certainly from Her Majesty. And they feel that they're not really behind this. At the same time, the Church in England, interestingly, has also called and I think set a day for a national day of prayer. It's like if the whole church can't get its act together on one simple thing like that. And I'm not against, by any means, a national day of prayer. It's the sense of entitlement. Like the sense of entitlement that goes with the demand that the churches are allowed to meet in person. It's the sense of entitlement that goes with that that bothers me. Now, the third thing that has happened, and a wonderful thing, is that some brilliant scientists, first across the line, although it's not it is a race, but it's wonderful news, isn't it, that a vaccine is being developed that looks like it's going to be effective against coronavirus. And this particular one is developed by Pfizer and BioNTech, a American-German partnership. And there's a lovely story about the couple who work at the BioNTech end of it, who got married and just committed themselves to working on the coronavirus vaccine. That's a wonderful story. And this vaccine, and maybe others, are going to follow quite quickly, because I'm told the scientists seem to think that the basic technique, which is beyond this, I have a degree in theology. It's completely useless in some matters. But I'm told that the type of vaccine that has been developed, for instance, is being developed by things like Imperial College and Oxford University in England, using similar concepts, and so are also likely to be effective. And I really hope and pray that, beginning with the most vulnerable people in the world, not so much in my own nation, but beginning with the most vulnerable people in the world, we get people vaccinated, and we see the end of coronavirus. But I'm so grateful for those scientists who have done what they have done. And the other thing, if you like, the fourth thing to throw into the pot, is that there's been a report today about child abuse, child sexual abuse particularly, but child abuse generally within the Catholic Church. And we know it's within the Church, and we know that there are particular types of church that can easily become safe havens for paedophiles. And listen, the Catholic Church does not have anything like a monopoly on such things. I personally have been on the receiving end of accusations of such things, and I'm aware just how prevalent some of this stuff is, and it's horrible. And what impresses me is that I'm not aware of anybody in the establishment who is tarring the entire church with the same brush and saying, look, there you are, all church leaders are paedophiles or abusers in some way of children and vulnerable people. We're not being tarred with the same brush. We're simply it's being pointed out that it's there, and it has been covered up. And we should collectively, because although I count myself as an evangelical, a charismatic evangelical former Baptist minister now, I have solidarity with all of the churches of Jesus Christ. And incidentally, isn't it wonderful that on the day that soon after Joe Biden was elected as president, whilst Donald Trump was on the golf course, Joe Biden quietly, as he always does, went to church. That impresses me. But leaving that aside, why am I troubled about this? It is because of this. What right do any of us within the church think that we should be subject to preferential treatment in terms of what we are allowed to do? And preferential treatment in terms of our role in society. In the light of all of these developments, what makes us think that? one of the things that I don't know about you, but I think there's a question that's been floating around the mind of a whole load of us who count ourselves, particularly if you like, people who believe the Bible is the Word of God, that's been troubling us. And that is, why is it that in spite of the massed prayers of billions, I imagine, of Christians, that God would remove COVID-19 from us, it hasn't happened. And I'm not aware of anybody in the political establishment or the scientific establishment. Perhaps there are people who are saying it, and I've not come across them. And I'm sure that there are posts on social media and so on. But I'm not aware of anybody saying, well, church has proved to be a damn squib, hasn't it? I mean, we believe as Christians in a supernatural God who created the world with a word. He spoke and the world came into existence. And so therefore, presumably, we believe that God could speak one word, go, or whatever language God speaks, might be Welsh, I'm told, and the coronavirus would simply disappear. And God hasn't done it. Millions and millions and millions of us have been praying. We need some humility, folk. We need some humility to say, well, in spite of all our efforts, to beseech our God to deliver us from this thing, God has not done what we've asked that he would graciously do. And that raises uncomfortable questions with me. Why? I'll come back to that in just a minute, if I may. But what are the uncomfortable truths that I have been forced to confront as I've become older, and I'm now in my mid-60s, and I've now finished. I've retired from pastoral ministry, and one of the things I believe that God has told me is that I'm no longer a minister. I don't work out exactly what that means. I most certainly am still a Christian. I have to work out what that means. But as my ministry, which lasted best part of 40 years in one form or another, as that has wound down to an end, I've found myself more and more confronting uncomfortable truth. Excuse me. My wife made a wonderful lasagna, and it's still trying to make it come back. You don't want to know that, do you? There was salad and bread rolls with it, in case you are interested, but no pudding. Anyway, but one of the things that I wrestle with and I agonise over is that, if I'm honest, most of the time, God has not intervened supernaturally in the things that I've asked him to do. I could run you through countless cases of people who have developed cancer and have died from it, people with brain hemorrhages and strokes, people with sick children, marriages falling apart. The list, just sadly goes on and on and on. And I've come to terms with the uncomfortable truth that most of the time, God does not intervene supernaturally. Well, I have friends in the Christian world who are, if you like, dispensationalists, who believe that the age of miracles is over because we have the Bible now. And that's quite an attractive, at the moment, that's quite an attractive safe haven theologically. The problem I have with it is twofold. One is that I don't believe that can be substantiated biblically. And I can't believe in a God who does not intervene in some way in the affairs of men. But secondly, it doesn't explain the times when something supernatural clearly has happened that I have witnessed or been a part of. Now, those occasions, those instances can be certainly counted on the fingers of two hands and arguably on the fingers of one hand. Now, so I'm left with two options. One is I try to find another explanation for the things which are inexplicable, and I can't, which is one of the reasons, and perhaps if I'm honest, the main reason I believe still in a supernatural God. Or I need to change my theology. I need to have a theological framework and outlook which is comfortable, which has a capacity for a worldwide pandemic which is hitting at the moment thousands and thousands and thousands, and in fact millions of vulnerable people who don't have the resources that we have in the Western world. And God is not intervening to do anything about it, directly at any rate. Now, these questions I continue to wrestle with, and I wish I could say I have simple answers. To be honest, I don't. But I do believe that we as a church should not. We don't have any place for complacency. We have no right to claim some kind of preferential treatment. And what we do need is humility to say, we've prayed and we'll keep praying. But so far, God does not seem to be doing a great deal. Now, of course, some of you will say, well, God is through science. And of course, absolutely, that is right. Which takes me to the next thing. You see, coronavirus looks like it's going to be beaten. COVID-19 is going to be defeated. Fantastic. I'm so pleased. I'm ecstatic over that. But the people who have brought about this victory over coronavirus, the people who've done that, scientists. And of course, scientists come in all shapes and sizes and shades of faith, from militant atheists to agnostics to committed Christian believers. And I really have no idea about the faith of the people who are at the forefront, the faith or otherwise. But you know what? When COVID-19 is beaten, it will be science that beats it. And it doesn't look like prayer and worship and all the other things that we do will be at the forefront. Let me just say a little bit more about science, because some of you will be saying, oh yeah, but science, modern science is built on the Christian principles of the scientists of earlier centuries. And you're absolutely right. Modern science, the science, even the most militant atheistic scientists of today, is in some real measure standing on the shoulders of people like Isaac Newton and others, who were fervent and sincere, committed Christian believers. And even today, there are countless leading scientists who are committed, evangelical, Bible-believing Christians. So it'd be right to say that these folk are standing on the shoulders of the women and men of faith of bygone centuries, who have laid the groundwork for modern scientific enterprise. Now, I don't know a lot more about it than that, but I'm sure that those things are true. But nevertheless, it is science, the application of science, which will defeat coronavirus. And it doesn't look as if God is simply going to remove it at the behest of the prayers of the faithful, however fervent and sincere we are. So, listen, can we please lose our sense of entitlement, regain our sense of servanthood, and exercise some humility in all of this? Now, this leads me on to the final thing I want to say. And I hadn't realised this was going to be a sermon length when I started, but these things are just getting in my head and I just wanted to get them out there. So what is God doing? Is God impotent? Is God disinterested? I cannot believe this is the God I know. Either I'm completely deluded, or the God I've sought to serve for 50 years or more now is A, loving of people, and B, is all powerful. If he wasn't all powerful, he wouldn't be God. And excuse me using the masculine personal pronoun, but it comes attributed to my age, if you like. I can't do the she or he God bit. So I can't believe in a God. If I believed that God was not all powerful, and if I believed that God didn't care, I couldn't be a believer. It wouldn't make any sense at all. And I have looked down the barrel of atheism and realised that actually, for me, the atheistic argument just doesn't stack up. I've read The God Delusion with a mixture of frustration and amusement, and if anything, it strengthened my faith rather than weakened it. So I want to say, if you're listening to this, maybe nobody will listen to this, but if you're listening to this as a Christian believer, the question I suppose I sort of then ask is, well, what is God doing? What is God doing? And this is the other reason why I'm so cross about different bits of the church demanding that we are allowed to meet in person again. Some bits of the church leaders of the church like to wear fancy dress and walk around in robes and cassocks and flowery things and what they call chasubles and wave things around and have choirs and thundering organs. Sometimes I wonder for whose benefit is that? You do that for God? Well, you're doing it because it makes you feel good and this is some sort of great ritual that you're into. And then there's the sort of branch of the church that I'm used to. Just in case you think I'm having a go at the high church, I come from the other end of the spectrum where we wear jeans and t-shirts and we fall over on the floor and speak in tongues and go, well, hey, and wave our arms around in worship and listen to passionate sermons that go on for anything up to an hour and a half. That's the bit of the church I come from. And we're demanding that we're able to strut our stuff. Our worship bands are able to thump out the 3 chords that you have to learn to be in a worship band and hammer the drums and you know, sort of, I don't know what it is with modern vocalists in church worship bands, but it seems like when you sing, you have to sound like you're in pain slightly and close your eyes and wince as if something is hurting. Perhaps your corset's still up too tight or something, and strut around on your stage, and then you have a preacher who's sort of full of himself and or herself and making extravagant claims about God and this, we want to do this, we want to be together. Well, let me suggest a possibility that what God is doing is giving the church a chance to reboot itself, to realise that for decades now, and maybe for a century or more, this thing that we call church, in terms of making an impact for the kingdom of God, has not been working and is not working, and it is not going to work anytime soon, because it is an utter cultural anachronism. And maybe, is it possible that what God is saying is, look, just stop doing church as you've been doing it, because it isn't working. If you believe that the purpose of the church is to reach a world that doesn't know Jesus Christ with the message of the gospel, then frankly, it is not working. And it's time we woke up to that. And it's time we say, well, God, what do I do? What does the church do? What? Suppose we just close all our buildings, rent premises when we need them. Suppose we stop having clergy. Suppose we stop having worship bands and organs. Suppose we go back to the point where Christians met in small groups in houses, and they devoted themselves to prayer and the breaking of bread and the sharing and learning and growing together and drawing others in as they did that. I don't know whether that's the path, but supposing God is saying, I want to break the mold. I want you to stop doing it as you've been doing it. And then not only are we expressing entitlement to which we are not entitled, and not only are we claiming for ourselves something that we really don't have, but actually we're thwarting what God wants to do, because we're saying, I want to get back to what I used to do. I want things to be like they were. I want to meet again. I want to do worship services. I want to meet in church. I want to sit in straight rows and look at the backs of people's heads. I want to sing all my favourite hymns and choruses, and I want to see the choir, and I want to have the incense, whatever it is that floats your boat. If what God is saying is, stop, scrap that, because I want to do what I want to do, looks nothing like that, then if we are badgering, and I think unreasonably badgering our political overlords to allow us to do what we've been doing for a century or more that really doesn't work, not only are we being arrogant and expecting privilege to which we're not entitled, but we're actually working against the will of God. Now, what am I doing at the minute? Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing at the minute. I'm doing very little, because I'm decided to stop, maintain my Christian friendships, and I've decided to stop and say, God, what is it you want? I don't know why you've taken away COVID-19. I wish you had, but you haven't. I will still worship you. I will still serve you, because that's the only thing I know to do, but I don't understand. And God, is it that one of the things you are doing right now is saying, forget what you have been doing and the way you've been doing it, because I'm wanting to do things entirely differently? I'm really not sure. I think it's going to take me another 6 months at least to work out what I think God might be saying and doing. I don't know whether God has a place for me in that, or whether God has sort of said, yeah, you toddle off into your garden shed, mate. I'd love to have a part of it once I understand what God is saying. And so what I'm doing, I'm praying, saying, God, please show me what you are doing so that I can get on board and do it with you. Thanks for listening. Bye.